I like the periodic table. And you might say it's because I like chemistry. But you, I think, will also learn to appreciate the periodic table and how much information that we can get from it. So to answer the next questions, I'm going to be going back and forth between this periodic table and the question to help you discover the relationship between the things that we're asked to know and the periodic table. So question 7 says, classify each of the following as an alkali metal, alkaline earth metal, transition element, halogen, or noble gas. So all of these things are names for groups or areas on the periodic table. There are 4 groups on the periodic table that have their own names. So I think of them as bookends. So recall, a group is a column. And groups on the top of them have ways of designating them. A number and a letter are the traditional ways. In modern periodic tables, they often simply number the columns 1 through 18. So the 4 groups that have their own names are the first 2 on the left and the last 2 on the right. I like to think of them as bookends. So they kind of squeeze the periodic table together. Group 1A is called an alkali metal. Group 2A is alkaline earth metal. Let me go back one step to the first group. So the alkali metals, I'm going to erase the word metal there, only go up to lithium. Hydrogen, while it is in group 1A, is not considered an alkali metal. It will, however, in cases with nonmetals, bond similarly to the alkali metals. The other 2 groups with column names or group names are group 7A, which is the halogens, that's E, and then group 8A, which are the noble gases. Now, if I remember correctly on the question, it also talked about transition metals. And transition metals are in the group here in the middle. In the traditional naming of the groups, they have the letter B. And inner transition metals are down here. Inner like inside. If you look here, you see how it says 55 and then here 56 and then here we come 57 and down here we have 79. The inner transition metals actually would fall into place right there on the transition metals. But you can see for the integrity or the shape of the periodic table, if we tried to squeeze those inner transition metals where they should belong in terms of the atomic numbers, it would cause the bottom half of the periodic table to jut out. Now let's reread question 7. Classify each of the following as an alkali metal, alkaline earth metal, transition element, or halogen or noble gas. So we have to use our periodic table, so letter A is calcium. So calcium is right here on the periodic table. That's letter A. And it is in the alkaline earth metals. Letter B is iron. Iron is right here, and you see that it falls in the transition metals. Letter C is Xe, or xenon. And Xe, although it's hard to see here, but if you have a periodic table next to you, is right there, and it falls in the noble gases. Letter D, K, potassium. Potassium is right next to calcium. It's in group 1A, which are the alkali metals. And chlorine, Cl. Chlorine is, I'll erase this right here, in group 7A, which is a part of the halogens. So we are able to classify the groups the elements are in by knowing where those groups are on the periodic table. The interesting thing about the elements in a same group is that because of their electron structure, which we'll learn about later, these elements in the same group tend to have similar physical and chemical properties. Well, what other type of information can we find on the periodic table? So, question 8. Give the group and period numbers for each of the following elements. Okay, group, this is going to be a column. And period, this is going to be the row. Whoops. So what we're going to have to do is find these elements on the periodic table and write down what row they're in and what column. Now I am going to write the group first and then the row second. Period. Okay, so letter A, bromine. So bromine is right here on the periodic table. So it is in group 7A, period 4. It's a halogen. Lithium. Lithium is right here. So it is in group 1A, period 2. Argon. Argon is here, which is group 8A, period 3. And radium. So radium is way down here on the periodic table. It's in group 2A, period 7. Now I gave the traditional identifications of the group with a number and a letter. Remember, the more modern way, if you look at the top of the periodic table, they just number the groups 1 to 18, and there would be no letter. So that would be a second way to do that. Let's look at the first one just to be sure you understand. So group 7A, if you look here in group 7A, do you see it's also numbered 17? And group 8A is also 18. So we could write 7A, this could be 17, and this one would be 18. 1A and 2A would still just be 1 and 2. See, group 1A is a 1 and group 2A is a 2. I prefer the A's and B's because, as you'll see in question 9, the A and B tell me a little bit about where the elements are. Actually, in question 10, it tells me a little bit about it. So in question 9, it says identify each of the following as a metal, nonmetal, or metalloid. Again, this is information we can discover by finding the elements on the periodic table. So there's a heavy step line right here on the periodic table. And many periodic tables will indicate this stair-step line. Elements to the left of it are metals. Elements to the right of it are nonmetals. And many of the elements along the stair-step line are metalloids. Your textbook has a nice colored table that has the metals, nonmetals, and metalloids highlighted in different colors. I do want to mention that hydrogen, even though it is on the metal side of the periodic table, it has characteristics of a nonmetal and would be classified as a nonmetal. So let's take a look at question 9. So letter A, aluminum. So you find aluminum, and even though it is on the stair-step line, it is an element that is classified as a metal because it has metallic properties, and so aluminum would be a metal. Silicon. Silicon is right next to aluminum. It is one that is classified as a metalloid. Metalloids have some properties of metals and nonmetals. They're most famous for being used in the semiconductor business. And letter C, phosphorus. So we would find a phosphorus, which is P, right next to silicon. And now we're on the nonmetal side. Now letter 10 is a big way also to identify each of the elements as a representative element, a transition metal, or an inner transition metal. And I did not mention the representative elements. However, I have already mentioned the transition elements are here in the middle, and transition elements have B's in their group. The inner transition elements are the ones that are down here on the bottom. And then all the groups with an A. So these first 2 groups and these last 6 groups, if it has an A on the top of its group, these are what we call representative elements. They're also called main group, representative elements. So again, this last question on this video has to do with finding the element on the periodic table and seeing which area it is in. So, calcium. Calcium is right here, and has an A in group 2A, so it is a representative element. EU. EU you might have to search around for because it's not as common. Europium, and it's down here in the inner transition elements. PD, which is palladium. And we have to find palladium, and I see it right here. And notice this is in a group with the B's. This is in the transition metals. Sometimes they call it transition metal, or they could call it transition element, or it could even be called transition metal elements. So don't let that throw you off. And then finally Te, which is tellurium. And looking for tellurium, there's Tc. I was right, that's Te, tellurium. And it again is in a group, so I look up here, see this is group 6A. All of these here have A's, and they are representative elements. So the lesson here is our periodic table is full of information. So with a little bit of memorization, we can use the periodic table to help us identify and classify all the elements.